How's it going, America? Welcome back to the Unfiltered AM channel. Before we jump into today's story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on more exciting content. Alright, let's not waste any time. Let's get straight to the story. The grand ballroom of the Waldorf Astoria in Manhattan buzzed with elegance and tension. A glittering chandelier hung overhead, casting golden light over a sea of politicians, media moguls, and high society. The evening's theme was restoring the American spirit, and everyone expected a night of fiery speeches and political jabs. At the center table sat Donald Trump, flanked by allies and curious eyes. It was his first public gala appearance since announcing he might not run for president again, and all eyes were on him. But the real spotlight was on Karoline Leavitt, a rising conservative voice many had underestimated. Dressed modestly in navy, she waited in the wings, calm but deliberate, clutching a folder of notes she had rewritten just an hour before. What few knew was that her original speech, filled with sharp commentary and policy talking points, now lay torn in a hotel trash bin. Something had stirred in her heart earlier that day, an urge to say something real, something bigger than politics. As the MC called her name, a ripple of polite applause spread through the room. Karoline stepped onto the stage, smiled, and paused before speaking. "Tonight, I want to talk about something we've forgotten," she said softly. "Not taxes, not polls, but manners, decency, and the soul of America." The room stilled. Even Trump, who had been flipping his dinner knife back and forth in boredom, looked up with interest. Karoline began her speech not with policy or partisanship, but with a memory. She told the story of her grandfather, a World War II veteran who stood to greet every person who entered his home, even delivery workers. He believed that the way you treat strangers defines your worth more than what you do for a living. As she spoke, the room seemed to shrink in size, not physically, but emotionally, as listeners leaned in, captivated. Her voice, young but firm, carried across the ballroom. She spoke of children no longer being taught to say, "please" and "thank you," and of leaders who shouted over each other instead of listening. "We've made loudness a virtue," she said, "but real strength is quiet. It's measured. It's respectful." Gasps could be heard from the back, not in offense, but in recognition. She was calling out everyone, left and right, with the same gentle but searing honesty. The biggest surprise came halfway through her speech when she quoted not a conservative icon, but Barack Obama. "Being respectful of others is not a weakness," she quoted. "It's the strength of a nation." That line broke expectations. The crowd didn't know whether to applaud or hold back, but the tension turned into respect. Even Trump's eyebrows rose in surprise. Karoline pivoted into a reflection on her own generation, often mocked as entitled or soft. But she didn't defend them, she challenged them. "Maybe we are soft," she admitted. "Maybe we were raised without the rituals of respect that made this country strong." She paused, scanning the audience. "But it's not too late for us to learn, or for you to teach." The room shifted. What began as a polite audience turned into an engaged one. Karoline's vulnerability was rare for such an event, especially from a rising political figure. She confessed to once ghosting a mentor out of pride, something she now regretted deeply. "I'm not proud of who I've been," she said, voice trembling, "but I'm proud of what I'm trying to become." Then, unexpectedly, she reached into her folder and pulled out a wrinkled handwritten letter. "This," she said, "was from a janitor at my high school. He passed away last year. He wrote this the day I graduated. I didn't read it until last week." She read a line aloud. "Politeness costs nothing, but it makes you rich in ways that matter." The audience was silent. Trump lowered his eyes. Karoline's speech turned deeply personal. She described her grandmother's Sunday dinners, where you couldn't leave the table without asking to be excused. She recalled the fear of disappointing her mother if she failed to send a thank you note. "We used to call those things little things," she said, "but maybe they were the big things all along." She then told a story no one expected. When she first entered politics, she had lied on a resume to land an internship. "I was 19. I wanted it so badly, and I got it. But it haunted me for years," she said. "That lie never left me. I used to fear it would ruin my career. But tonight, I want to let it go, not because it's safe, but because truth matters more than status." That confession sent a jolt through the room. Some gasped. Others nodded in respect. And Trump? He stared at Karoline, motionless, his fingers pressed to his lips. No one had ever seen him this still for this long. Not even during his own trials. Something had changed in him, but no one yet knew what. As Karoline continued, cameras began zooming in on Donald Trump. It was subtle at first, just a shot or two for B-roll. But as she spoke about her grandfather's final words, always shake hands, always look people in the eye. A tear visibly welled in Trump's eye and slipped down his cheek. The cameraman didn't expect it. Neither did the director in the control booth. Is that real? Someone whispered behind the scenes. The feed was broadcast live, and within seconds, Twitter was ablaze. #TrumpTears trended globally. Some mocked it. Most didn't. Something about that tear felt pure, honest, human. Back on stage, Karoline had no idea what was happening. She was just finishing her final line. America doesn't need louder voices. It needs kinder hearts. As she stepped away from the podium, the entire ballroom stood to its feet, including Trump. He clapped, not with performance, but with weight. And in that moment, a nation felt something it hadn't felt in years. Hope. Backstage, Karoline took a deep breath, her heart pounding. The applause from the ballroom still echoed behind her as she stood alone for a moment, trying to process everything. An assistant handed her a bottle of water and whispered, "The media is going wild. You just broke the internet." Karoline smiled politely, but inside, she was overwhelmed. She hadn't expected the speech to resonate this deeply, certainly not with him. Suddenly, she felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned around, stunned to see Donald Trump himself standing there. Unannounced, unguarded, and for once, not surrounded by cameras or sycophants. "You said what needed to be said," he told her, voice low. "And you made me think about my mother." Karoline blinked. It was the first time she had ever seen him appear vulnerable, even slightly shaken. Then he said something she never expected. "I want you to help me write my next speech." She thought he was joking, but he wasn't. "No one talks like that anymore," he added. "But they should. I should." Karoline, caught completely off guard, could only nod. She had just walked off stage a speaker, and walked into history as something far more. The next morning, Karoline awoke to find hundreds of messages on her phone. Most were from journalists, political strategists, and even celebrities, praising her speech. But one message stood out, a scanned photo of a handwritten letter. No name, no subject line, just a single image. Curious, she tapped it open, and froze. The letter was written by her grandfather. But it wasn't the one she had read on stage. It was a different one she had never seen before. It was dated 2 weeks before he passed and addressed to Donald J. Trump. "You remind me of myself," it read. Loud, stubborn, and deeply loyal. But don't forget, a man's strength isn't in how many fight for him, it's in how he treats the ones who can't. Karoline stared at the screen, chills racing down her spine. How had this ended up in her inbox? Moments later, another message popped up, from an anonymous source. He kept this in a drawer for years. Maybe it's time he saw it again. That's when she realized her grandfather had once tried to reach Trump himself. That afternoon, Karoline arranged a private meeting at Mar-a-Lago. The mood was surprisingly calm. No press, no advisors, just her and Trump in his sunlit study. She handed him the printed letter without a word, unsure how he would react. He took it, adjusted his glasses, something he rarely did in public, and read in silence. For a long moment, he didn't say anything. His fingers trembled slightly as he turned the page over, checking the back. "He was a Navy man?" Trump finally asked, eyes not meeting hers. Karoline nodded. "Pacific Fleet. 3 Bronze Stars." Trump swallowed hard. "My mother used to say the same thing, about kindness." He folded the letter gently, almost reverently. Then, in a voice softer than she'd ever heard, he said, "I didn't cry last night because of your speech alone. I cried because I remembered who I used to be, before politics." The confession hit Karoline like a wave. She hadn't just stirred a crowd, she had cracked open a man long seen as impenetrable. She had, somehow, found the thread that stitched the past to the present. News of Karoline's private meeting with Trump quickly leaked. Reporters hounded her apartment. The networks replayed clips of her speech on a loop, labeling it, "the moment America blinked." But what no one knew, yet, was that behind the scenes, a political firestorm had begun. Several top advisors were furious at Trump's new direction, calling it soft, off-brand, and too emotional. Karoline was quietly offered a powerful role, lead speechwriter for Trump's future events, with influence over messaging and tone. It was a dream offer, yet also a dangerous one. Accepting meant stepping into a brutal, polarized arena. Declining meant walking away from the biggest platform of her life. As she debated, she received a message from someone unexpected: Melania Trump. The former First Lady invited Karoline for tea. During their conversation, Melania shared something stunning. "He's different after that night," she said. "You reminded him of something I tried to tell him for years." Then Melania leaned in. "Take the job, but only if you write from your truth, not his script." Karoline left that meeting with a decision made, and a fire in her chest. 1 month later, Trump took the stage again, this time in Iowa. The crowd expected the usual: tough talk, jabs at opponents, and rally cries. But what they got was something else entirely. Trump opened by saying, "A young woman reminded me what strength really looks like." The crowd stilled, curious. Then he launched into a speech that was both powerful and deeply personal. He spoke of humility, of mistakes, of listening more than speaking. He shared a story about his mother teaching him how to write thank you notes. And when he quoted Karoline's line, "America doesn't need louder voices. It needs kinder hearts," the crowd didn't just cheer. Many cried. It was a rare moment of collective pause, of reflection in a time of noise. Backstage, Karoline watched, stunned, not just because he delivered the words, but because he believed them. She had written them, but he had owned them. And in that moment, she realized her mission wasn't to change people. It was to remind them of who they once were and who they could still become. After the Iowa speech went viral, Karoline received an unexpected phone call from a major news outlet. They had caught wind of the mysterious letter written by her grandfather to Donald Trump and wanted to publish it, along with an op-ed from her explaining its significance. She hesitated. The letter had been personal, almost sacred. Was it right to share it with the world? She called Trump to discuss it. Surprisingly, he encouraged her. "Let them see it," he said. "Let them know this country was built on that kind of love and honesty." His tone was calm, reflective. Karoline decided to move forward. A week later, the letter was published in the Sunday edition of the New York Times, paired with her heartfelt commentary. The piece went viral in less than 12 hours. But what Karoline didn't expect was the outpouring of stories from everyday Americans who had also written letters to public figures. Some of them never sent, some returned unopened. Hundreds shared their grandfather's war stories, their mother's wisdom, their handwritten hopes. Suddenly, it wasn't just about politics. It was about rediscovery. America was remembering itself through the forgotten ink of its citizens. As Karoline's influence grew, not everyone was happy. Old colleagues in Washington, some jealous, some threatened, began digging into her past. One reporter unearthed a college essay where she had criticized both Republican and Democratic administrations. It was meant to be thoughtful, nuanced, but it was twisted into headlines: "Leavitt no patriot," and "bipartisan or betrayer." The backlash hit hard. Social media turned cruel. Trolls accused her of being a sellout, others of being too naive to play with the big dogs. Even Trump's own advisors began to distance themselves. Karoline, feeling the pressure, considered stepping away from it all. She had only wanted to speak truth, not become a symbol or a target. But then came the twist. Trump defended her publicly. "She's not perfect, but neither am I," he said in an interview. "We need more people like her, not fewer." That moment, broadcast nationwide, sent shockwaves through both parties. It was the first time Trump had stood by someone not for loyalty, but for integrity. And suddenly, Karoline wasn't just a voice. She was a movement. During a panel discussion at Georgetown, Karoline encountered an unlikely supporter: former President Barack Obama. Invited to the same event, he approached her backstage with a warm smile. "Your speech reminded me of something I said in 2008, he said. "But you said it better." She was stunned. They talked, briefly but sincerely, about unity, legacy, and the emotional cost of leadership. Word of their encounter spread quickly. Pundits were baffled. How could a conservative figure like Karoline earn praise from a liberal icon? But many Americans saw something else. Hope. For the first time in a long time, two very different political figures had shared a human moment without insults, without competition. The biggest surprise came 2 days later when Obama sent Karoline a signed copy of his book, with a handwritten note, "Keep speaking from your heart. History listens to those who whisper truthfully." That gesture, quiet and personal, reminded Karoline that change didn't always come through loud battles. It often began in small acts of grace. Inspired by the shift she was witnessing, Karoline launched a nationwide initiative called Letters to America. It was a platform where people could submit handwritten or typed letters about what America meant to them, no matter their background, age, or belief. Schools joined. Veterans submitted memories. Teenagers poured their fears and dreams into digital envelopes. Soon, the movement exploded. Town halls began reading the letters aloud at city meetings. High school students turned them into theater performances. Even members of Congress were caught quoting lines from the submissions during debates. America wasn't just divided anymore. It was listening to its people, its history, its conscience. And the biggest twist? One of the most shared letters came from a 9-year-old girl in Idaho who wrote, "America is kind when no one is watching. Maybe that's when it matters most." That single sentence was picked up by every major media outlet, emblazoned on t-shirts, posters, murals. And Karoline? She simply smiled. The mission was working. Months later, Karoline was asked to give a closing speech at the National Mall for an event commemorating Voices of a Reunited America. The crowd was massive. More than 500,000 people gathered. As she stood at the podium, she didn't feel like a politician, or even a rising star. She felt like a storyteller, a messenger. She spoke with calm conviction. "We are not just a nation of opinions. We are a nation of letters. A nation of values written down, passed on, often ignored, but never erased." The audience was silent. She continued, "The soul of America isn't found in our debates. It's in our listening." She ended with a quote, not from a founding father, but from the little girl in Idaho. And the crowd erupted. As she stepped down, tears welled up in her eyes, not because of applause, but because she saw something rare in politics: unity. Donald Trump, Barack Obama, veterans, school children, conservatives and liberals, all clapping side by side. And for the first time in a long time, Karoline Leavitt believed something radical. Not that America could be great again, but that it already was.